Okay, I want to talk about immigration. I am so sick of the way people present the idea of immigration and how it works. It's presented always by the left, of course, as though immigration is something we have to have because we're not reproducing fast enough to fill the needs and demands of our economy and our world, which has always seemed like a ridiculous argument to me. But I've never heard anyone refute that idea and give any other arguments except, oh, we have to have immigration. It's important. We've got to have it. We've got to have it. Finally, someone has come out and refuted this ridiculous argument. I am so glad to finally hear it. Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern are in Australia being interviewed by an Australian journalist, and they give the most beautiful arguments about immigration and why it's totally and completely unnecessary and how we can do completely without it. So, without saying any more, here are Stefan and Lauren talking about it.
All right, so how about in terms of immigration, for example, in Australia, we have lots of temporary skilled migrants because we don't have enough people to support IT.
You absolutely have enough people.
Yeah, to support our IT
You
infrastructure.
absolutely have enough people. The market simply bids up the prices where there are shortages, and then more people go.
Right.
You absolutely. You can have 5 people in the country. You have enough people; they'll just end up being paid a lot.
Yep, right, but what do you do in the intervening time when we have an enormous skills gap?
What do you mean?
As in, there aren't enough people who understand how computers work well enough.
How do you know?
Because we bring in...
No, but how do you know there aren't enough people?
Because there is a job gap.
How do you know?
We can't fill the...
No, you can fill any job. You just bid up wages, right?
Right, but if they're not trained in IT infrastructure, then they can't do the job.
Right, and that's because, see, normally what happens is, when there's going to be a skills shortage, businesses know that ahead of time, right? Because businesses have to, I've been a business owner, right? I guess I still am, right? So businesses plan 5-10 years down the road, at a minimum, right? You have to do that as a business owner. So what you do is you say, okay, how many people are studying the essential skills that I need, right? And if there aren't enough people who are going to be coming through whatever training program is necessary, whether it's university or trade school, maybe just self-study as well, what you do is you say, okay, well, we're going to have to talk to the universities. We're going to start offering people salaries, higher salaries coming right out of university a couple of years down the road, right? What that does is it sends a very clear signal to people who are figuring out what to study. Say, oh, well, if I go into feminist theory, then I'm going to make an average of 25K coming out. But if I go into IT, maybe I get 75K, a guaranteed job. This is how business and education used to work. My father got his PhD in geology by dealing with a company who said, okay, we'll pay for your PhD, but in return you give us a work commitment after you graduate. And that's how businesses work with education to make sure that skills gaps gets closed off. Now, if there is a genuine skills gap, it means that there has been some miscommunication, usually interfered with by the government, between businesses who need the skills and the universities who train people to fulfill those skills. And why on earth you should have mass migration because the government has messed up with the price signals is utterly beyond me. That's saying, well, the government has screwed things up. Let's have another giant government program called immigration to cover up the mess. And also, why are people graduating from 12 years of government schools without good skill sets? Why do they even have to go to university? In 12 years, you can go from being someone who knows nothing about being a doctor to being the most amazing surgeon on the planet. You get students for 12 years. Why aren't they being trained to function in a modern economy? Because the government schools are terrible. So again, you have another giant government program called immigration to fill in for another terrible government program called education. Let's start fixing things from the root rather than constantly applying these terrible band-aids.
I just want to add to here, it's also fascinating to me that we have a lot of panic from the millennial generation who say, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to have a family because it's going to be so difficult because both the man and the woman are going to have to work. You need a double income because you can't support a family. Yet we're saying we also have a crisis of not being able to fill jobs. Before, you could have a man having the entire income before women even came into the workforce, and he could pay for his entire family. He could get a house. The wife never had to go for work. How come there wasn't a panic over more workers then, and yet people were being paid more? And then when women joined the workforce and doubled the size, suddenly everyone's getting paid less. It's exactly the point. It's about you add more people to the workforce, wages are going to go down.
And sorry to give you a whole lecture here, I apologize for that, but just very briefly, the entire financial system, which is not a free market system, but central government, its currency is a giant government program, relies on the value of real estate staying high. And we saw what happened when there was a little bit of a dip in the value of real estate in America in 2007, 2008. The entire system almost came apart, and they had to pump $700 billion of taxpayer money into the bank coffers, which was an utterly immoral and wrong thing to do. So when you have a baby boom, you get huge demand for housing, right? Of course, we know this from the boomers after the Second World War, and that creates a big burst in housing and all of that. And then you get a hollowing out with the next generation, and that's going to cause the value of real estate to drop, which is what millennials should be experiencing, because there's fewer of them than there were of boomers. But the problem is that the banks right now have their assets in real estate. So if the demand for housing goes down, then the value of the bank's assets goes down, and they usually have a 30-to-1 asset to lending ratio. And so they really have to call in a lot of loans, they have to pull back on their economic activity, or they go bankrupt. And so one thing that immigration is doing is by constantly bringing people into the country and giving them taxpayer money with which to buy housing, you're propping up the value of housing, of cheaper housing, and then people fly out of those neighborhoods because they're dangerous or unfamiliar, and it pushes up the whole price of housing, which maintains the asset value sheets of the banks. Now, if there is a drop in the value of housing, the whole Ponzi scheme of modern finance falls apart. So immigration doesn't have anything to do with skills shortages. It has to do with just, we need to prop up the value of real estate, and we need to create this delusion that somehow there are going to be enough workers to pay for the boomers' retirements because the government's promised things that they can't pay for. And generally what governments do, when they make promises they can't pay for, when the bill comes due, they go to war.
I hate to take you back to that IT example I gave.
Sure.
But
that's my field, man. I'm an IT guy from way back, so.
So if, for example, you were just to reject, like right now, hypothetically, if the government said
no immigration,
457s, not anymore, anyone who's got one, on a plane back home.
Yep.
There's going to be a long teething period.
Why?
Because there aren't enough graduates to fill those.
But why do you need graduates? I ran an entire IT company, never took a course in computer science.
Do you really think it would be seamless to transition?
I don't know what seamless means.
As in, like, you don't think there'd be an enormous shock given that the IT basically...
The market is incredible. Do you know, there was this question, right? So let me give you a historical example about how well the free market deals with stuff. At the end of the Second World War in America, there was a whole government program set up because they said, well, we've got millions of guys coming back from war. Who's going to hire them? How are they going to get jobs? Where are they going to go? And there was this whole massive government department set up to deal with all the problem of the GIs coming back from war. By the time they issued their first mandate, everybody was employed. The free market will solve these problems so rapidly, it's insane. But we're so used to, it's got to be all managed by the government. We've got to have all our ducks in a row. While everyone's talking, the free market will handle it. You don't know what the skill set is of Australians. For me, like I ended up, I wrote software that sold for millions and millions of dollars. I was chief technical officer of the software company, had dozens of people reporting to me, building the most complex software for environmental issues that you could imagine. Never took a computer science course. So you don't need necessarily all of this formal education. You need skills. I myself loved computers from the age of 11. I got a little bit of inheritance. First thing I did was buy a computer, had a program back in machine language. So there's a huge amount of untapped skills in there. You're just burying it with all this external stuff.
You're quite a big outlier, though. If you were 11 years old and your first savings to buy a computer, that's not typical of the rest of the population. I mean, I have to teach people around here how to set up their emails. And that sort of thing.
But you work for a government-funded organization, so you may not be on the cutting edge of skill sets here.
Yeah, but I don't think unemployed people are.
The younger generation spend most of the days on computers. Computers are becoming our new method of communication, our new method of work, education, everything. Everyone is figuring out and adapting to the jobs and the culture that we are coming into. And it's a really scary prospect for me as a millennial to think of if they just opened the borders to anyone to come in to take these jobs. There are millions of people that are going to come in and they'll do these jobs for $5, for $3, for $2. And what's going to happen to all of the workforce that the liberal far-left governments claim to support, claim that they're standing for them? Well, they're going to disappear. We're not going to be able to get good jobs because there will be people that will literally be willing to do it for slave labor wages. We criticize China for that, and yet we do massive business with them without good trade deals. You want to bring that into this country? Like,
here's the thing too. If immigration is reduced, let's say, you are giving a massive pay rise to everyone in Australia. Because when immigration is reduced, the price of real estate goes down. And also you're giving people back their time because, as you know, immigrants overwhelmingly live in cities, right? They don't go, it's not like people are immigrating into Australia to farm the back 40 of the outback, right? I mean, they're coming to the cities, which means infrastructure burdens, which means traffic problems, which means healthcare issues because, you know, they're going to get sick and they're going to rent. So if you say, okay, well, we're going to nurture our homegrown talent, then your requirement for all of these things goes down. The traffic will go down, real estate prices will go down. Everyone benefits from that in the long run. Is there going to be a transition? Well, sure. But you'd be amazed at how well people will learn things and how quickly we'll learn things if there's a pot of gold on the other side. I think the Australians that I've met so far, yourself included, intelligent, resourceful, energetic, curious, they don't cover the skills gap in no time at all, and everyone else gets the bonus of lower real estate prices. I mean, the place that we're staying...
Well, not everyone. What about the people who already own the houses?
That is a very fair point. But they're not selling their houses. That's a paper loss, right? Only if they sell their houses does that loss manifest. But the place that we're staying is like some old factory, and I won't give it any details, but it's kind of rickety, kind of creepy, kind of old. $1.1 million for one of these places. Yeah. That is mental, and there's absolutely no reason for it. We have a baby bust. The prices should be falling.
Right, but you know, I mean, a lot of Sydney's and Melbourne's price hikes are because of not migrants, but because it's Chinese.
Sure.
Chinese super welfare.
And can Australians go and buy up a lot of China, or is that not allowed? Can Australians go and move to China and live there? You don't have reciprocal agreements with these countries that I'm aware of. So it's a lopsided, one-sided deal that is to the detriment in the long run of Australia and to the advantage of China. Why doesn't your government negotiate reciprocity agreements so that there can be a back and forth of these kinds of resources? I don't think that's happening. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, no, we can't exactly negotiate something on the equal terms with China because we're entirely dependent on them for trade.
That means that they're dependent also upon you for trade. Of course you can negotiate with. Oh, so if you can't negotiate with the country, why the hell are you letting its citizens buy up your land and country?
Yep.
If you can't even negotiate with them, then you can at least block them from buying up all of your land and country.
And there you have it. The myth of the need for immigration debunked.